On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Kansas lands another four-star recruit for the class of 2025 on the football field. We update the transfer portal, latest visits, offers, and what to come possibly in the rest of the offseason before spring ball for KU football.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on our YouTube page and like and subscribe to the show. Certainly helps out from our point of things. We're going to be talking KU football's newest commit with Malachi Curvey, who is a 2025 four-star. We're going to talk latest KU football transfer portal update on this episode of the show. First, we are brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So we'll start with the Malachi Curvey commitment for KU, then move to the transfer portal on this episode of the show. So Curvey is a basically all-around athletic player, someone who he's already doing really good things at the high school level, but really has an opportunity to do even more at the collegiate level. So this is what he posted on social media, committed to KU on Sunday. It is said often, but I would first like to truly thank God for the position I'm in and the opportunities he has provided for me. I would not have the gifts or guidance that I do if it wasn't for him. I would also like to thank my entire family and support system with helping me get to where I am through the highs and lows to shape me into the man I'm becoming. I want to thank my parents specifically for sacrificing a lot of time and money into this entire process while believing in me wholeheartedly. Lastly, I want to thank all coaches and schools that have been a part of my recruitment and shown interest in me as a player. With that being said, after lots of conversations, thoughts, and prayer, I would like to verbally commit to the University of Kansas. He had interest from a lot of local schools, Iowa State, Missouri. His dad played defensive line at Iowa State, so he's from Iowa. That certainly was maybe the one to beat, and KU was able to get it done. He is ranked 50th for number 50 athlete in the country by 24/7 Sports. They gave him an 87 grade overall. Rivals ranked him as the number 22 tight end, but he's been playing both sides of the ball in Iowa. Some schools are recruiting him as a tight end. Some schools recruiting him as a defensive end. Some schools recruiting him as a linebacker, which it seems like that would be the case for Kansas. He had a 5.7 grade, which is about a very high-end three-star on Rivals. ESPN listed him as the number 31 linebacker and a 79 grade. On3 listed him as the number 12 linebacker, a 93 grade, and like a top 100 recruit in the country. And you look at some of the composites, the 24/7 composite has him as a four-star and 278th nationally. The On3 composite has him as a four-star, 248th nationally. Based on some of those different sites, somewhere between 6'3" and 6'4", either way, good length, somewhere between 195 and about 220 pounds. So, obviously somebody, if he is a linebacker, you're maybe looking to add, if he is 220, 10 pounds to him. If he is a tight end, maybe it's a little more than that. If it's the end, obviously even more than that. But something of interest that he told John Kirby with Jayhawk Slant, quote, "Some very important factors to me so far are the longevity of the staff and how long they are going to continue to stay. With that, I look towards what help athletes can get in programs with the academic side of things. I also look at how many athletes enter the portal because for myself personally, I don't want anything to do with the portal once I get to that level." End quote. That is so refreshing from a player. Now, to be clear, I don't have a problem with players who enter the portal or whatnot. My personal opinion at this point is maybe things have gotten a little too far and that I'm cool with guys leaving for the first time or leaving as grad transfers. I don't necessarily love the rule that you can leave as many times you want. What's stopping a player from, leaving at the end of December, then leaving in spring ball, then leaving in fall camp? He could technically go to 12 schools in 4 years, So, but I understand the player movement and all that sort of stuff. And I'm cool with that. But I think what it does for me is the kids and the players who are more committed to it, it doesn't necessarily, tisk or whatever to the guys who are moving, but for the guys who are not, I think it almost boosts them up in a way where you appreciate it more because of it, right? There's a way to appreciate one thing without, I guess, dissing the other thing. And that's what I feel about this. Automatically love what Malachi Curvy is coming into. And that doesn't, guarantee that a player does or doesn't transfer what you're saying coming in, but it certainly shows the mindset that he has. And that I wish a lot more, players were kind of that ilk of, hey, I want to go somewhere that I can stick around and be a part of a family for, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is. And I think that's really cool to see. Now, it's hard to exactly discuss how he's going to impact his position group without fully knowing what position he will be playing in the future. But it definitely seems as if KU has been recruiting him for defense and specifically at the linebacker position. You look at if he comes in as a tight end, we know KU's had that position loaded, and, he would join kind of the ranks of Carson Brune and Jaden Ham and some of those future guys they have in that room. If there's defensive end, you join the ranks of guys like, Dak Brinkley and Deshaun Warner, who played well in the All-American game this past weekend. But I think, again, realistically, you kind of look at linebacker. One, because if you're picking between those positions, that's been kind of the weakest room so far for KU that you're looking to bolster. If there's something about having a stud athletic linebacker that can go sideline to sideline, and it seems like that is what this kid can do. Great length, can kind of move, laterally and agile and is able to get out there and everything. But somebody who, we saw this with JB Brown this year. JB Brown was a linebacker for you. At times they would line him up as a pass rusher on pass rushing downs, and he would, had a couple sacks this year. Maybe that ends up being what you end up doing here, that he's mostly a linebacker, but at times, you move him to a defensive end spot when you need to rush the passer and bring on an extra defensive back instead of a linebacker spot. When you look at the linebacker room for 2024, you have Tywan Berryhill and JB Brown. Both those guys will be seniors. So obviously with Curvy, he's arriving in 2025, should the commitment stay through and everything like that. Cornell Wheeler, who's in that linebacker room, is also a senior. And so you're losing, 3 guys right there. And you bring into the room that you look in 2025. Okay, by 2025, you could have a redshirt sophomore version of Logan Brantley. You could have a redshirt senior version of like Tristan Fletcher. You could have a redshirt freshman version of Ja'Cory Stewart, who was a good recruit that you brought in this past class also. Maybe if he's that athletic, he ends up playing the Hawk position for you, in which case, you fast forward to 2025, Jason Gilliam could be a redshirt senior. Jonathan Kamara could be a redshirt freshman or something like that. But I think more likely maybe one of those 2 regular linebacker positions. So we'll kind of wait and see there. But you need to add more talent to a linebacker room. And you feel good about, maybe the futures of Brantley, who heard a lot of good things about so far. Ja'Cory Stewart, we'll wait and see how that comes together, but certainly high on what he's been able to do coming in from the high school level. Jonathan Kamara, very athletic player who I think that one's more specific to Hawk. You need to add more talent there, and these are the players that can do that. And when you look at what KU's had so far in the linebacker room, for the most part, under the Lance Leipold era, it's guys who came in as transfers, right? Whether it was last year with Eric Gilliard coming in from UCF, or Lorenzo McCaskill from Louisiana, Rich Miller coming in from Buffalo, JB Brown from Bowling Green, Cornell Wheeler from Michigan. And obviously with the transfer portal, that's never not going to be a thing, that a position won't have transfers in it. But it certainly is one of those positions where it's like, okay, eventually you want to have homegrown talent at all these different positions. And that's been the one where maybe you've had the least homegrown talent, at least of players like hitting the field, certainly. And it feels like you're trending in that right direction. And this is kind of bringing to that a little bit more. Beyond the position group, this now gives Kansas 2 commits for the class of 2025. And certainly one that is your first defensive side of the ball with Curvy. The other one, David McComb. And I think both guys are top 300 recruits on like ESPN. Both are at least a 4-star by at least one publication. So at the very least, high-end 3 stars, 4 stars, whatever it is. That's a great start to a class. Obviously, more work has to be done here, and maybe this class ends up being bigger than the last. I know KU in the past has kind of, alluded to or said stuff about they want to bring in the number of high school recruits to replace the seniors that they lose. Well, this past year, they didn't lose a ton of seniors. It was in the teens. They're going to lose a lot more seniors this next year. So are they going to bring in a ton more, high school recruits? Are they going to hit the portal a little bit harder next year? It's probably going to be a combo of both, but either way, great start to the class after you had a great recruiting class here too in 2024. Let's get to a KU football transfer portal update with latest offers, visits, who's out right now, tight window for what's ahead before spring ball and everything before I guess this window kind of closes up on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, this episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Jase Medical is helping you get a bunch of different antibiotics right to your door that can help you avoid any issues and, maybe things that are going on that are out of your control. According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. You don't want to be caught unprepared, and I can only imagine what it would be like if you were caught unprepared due to maybe supply chain issues or something like that, if you need some life-saving medication. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to anyone, so visit jasemedical.com and complete their physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and then your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com and use offer code LOCKED ON to get $20 off your order. All right, latest news in the transfer portal for KU football, whether it's visits, offers, who's out, that sort of thing for KU. So the first was Ryan Smith. Ryan Smith is a 6'2", 232-pound defensive end from Duke. I'm not going to get too much into his season or what he did or the PFF grades because this one's already been wrapped up. He visited KU earlier, I guess last week, and ended up returning to Duke. They obviously have a new head coach, so that was probably part of the reason he entered the portal, with Mike Elko leaving to Texas A&M. And Manny Diaz, who's now at Duke, was able to convince him to come back. So Smith goes back there, and that's obviously a hit for KU. Looks like they're still trying to add another defensive end. Obviously, they already added Dylan Woodkey, but trying to add another one because you lost Austin Booker to add a little bit more depth and maybe that one last rotational guy that you can kind of add to. Javier Derritt visited KU. He is a defensive tackle. If you reminder, we talked about him on an earlier episode. Thank you to the everydayers who listened to that. But he is a 6'2", 280-pound, sixth-year senior defensive tackle transferring from North Dakota State. It's kind of a solid player who would either be a fine starter or a strong rotational guy. Like either way, you absolutely would love to add a player like that into your rotation on the defensive line and maybe could be a starter there. So after KU, he visited USC, then Missouri. With USC, his former head coach at North Dakota State is now at USC. He coaches linebackers, not D-line, but there is that connection. Missouri has been killing it so far in recruiting and the transfer portal. Both those schools have pretty good setups with NIL, and I continue to, with KU, it seems like they've spent more of the resources, I think deservedly so, on the guys who are currently on the roster to retain them. And on top of that, you probably have a lot of funds going to the stadium and different things that if it does become an NIL race, then maybe that makes it tough, KU versus USC and Missouri there, but maybe it doesn't. And he's from the area originally, I think born in Missouri, went to St. Thomas Aquinas High School, which is on the Kansas side of the border. So maybe it does come down to that. Maybe for his final year, the family's like, hey, we want to be able to drive to your games, and it's KU or Missouri. Who knows what would come of that, but that would be a big get if they could get it. Still kind of waiting on the decision there. An offer did go out for KU to Seth McLaughlin, who is the center at Alabama. He has since committed, though, to Ohio State to be with Will Howard, the former Kansas State quarterback, who is now going to Ohio State. No need to spend much more time on this because the offer, again, didn't really matter. But the one thing that it shows you there, as you were offering Seth McLaughlin, is you are interested in bringing in a center. We kind of wondered in the offseason, would Michael Ford move over to center? Because last spring, during spring ball, Mike Nowitzki had an injury that kept him out of spring ball. And so who was playing center when Mike Nowitzki was out during spring ball? It was Michael Ford. They moved him over. And they gave snaps to like all the linemen at different points. They cross-train them and get reps for a lot of those guys. But Ford got a lot of reps there, making me kind of wonder, okay, would you just move Ford, who was one of the highest graded guards, one of the 2 highest graded guards in the entire Big 12 on Pro Football Focus last year or this past season? Would they move just him to center and then maybe have Baines and Armaj Reed Adams at guard? Well, Armaj Reed Adams has since gone. Obviously, Spencer Lavelle has gone now. By the way, Armaj Reed Adams picked Texas A&M, so good for him that he's probably getting a good NIL payday based on how things have gone at A&M. And I do think for what it's worth, that projection of him being guard, I'm kind of under the estimation that Reed Adams, who played right tackle in the bowl game, maybe he wants to play tackle more than guard, which I don't know how we'll see how that goes because I think he was a solid guard. I don't know if his traits, I guess, make him as good of a tackle. So we'll see how he does in the SEC. He's betting on himself, and if that works out, good for him. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. That obviously limits it a little bit more. So I don't know if that would be part of it. And you're just like, okay, we'll keep Michael Ford at guard, and then we'll have Kobe Baines there, and then we'll bring in a center. Or if it's just about, you like Michael Ford more guard, then you do at center, or whatever the reason. But yeah, clearly the offer to Seth McLaughlin shows that. And then furthermore, there was a visit from Shane Bumgardner, who is a center from Lane Tiffin College. I guess technically you could move him to guard and play Ford at center, but it definitely feels like to me that KU is going after the centers, which would make your offensive line next year, left tackle, Calvin Clements or Logan Brown, whoever wins that competition. Right now, if you had to make me a guess, I would probably lean toward Calvin Clements at the moment, as Brown's been dealing with an injury. Then at left guard and right guard, I don't know who would play where and what. I don't know that it matters that as much, but Kobe Baines would be one, Michael Ford would be the other. Center at this point feels like they're trying to attack it to bring on a center. Maybe it ends up being a Shane Bumgardner, or maybe it ends up being somebody else. And then at your right tackle spot, looking at after coming off the injury in the bowl game, Bryce Cable do. And then maybe, you always think about, like, if you can have 8 good offensive linemen, 3 good backup offensive linemen who can cover the different positions, right? Maybe one plays left tackle, right tackle. Maybe one plays left guard, right or right guard. Maybe one is just a flex where they can play the right side or just the left side, or they can play center and right tackle, or whatever it is. You just need a mix of all those, right? So you want to have coverage between 3 guys in the backup. Well, you feel like you have one with whoever loses out between Logan Brown and Calvin Clements, and maybe that's the guy who can cover, both tackle spots, or maybe they can move inward and be a guard there. So there's one of yours. And then maybe the other two, you're looking at, I don't know, Kendra Dorian. He's been in the program for a few years now, after starting a bunch of games at Buffalo before he transferred in. Nolan Gorchika, it sounds like he's started to progress in a good way. Does a guy like DK Stearns or James Livingston take the step up? And then what else can you add kind of in the portal on the offensive line? But certainly Bumgardner would be a nice get if you could get him. 6'3", 290. Lane Tiffin College is a D2 school. He will be a 5th-year senior in 2024. Now, you have to be careful because not everything is congruent, but last time KU went to D2 for an offensive lineman, worked out pretty well. They brought in Dominic Pooney, who immediately became one of their best linemen as a guard, and then moved to left tackle this year and was their best lineman, and now is going to go get drafted into the NFL. It'd be silly to expect everything to be just like that, but I guess the point there is good players are good players, and they can make the jump up in competition. I think we're seeing that more and more in like college football and college basketball. There are players jumping up from NAIA, D3, D2, and are still having a lot of success at the FBS level. But he was a 2nd-team All-American. He was a 2-time first-team All-Conference pick, so he's sustained it for multiple years. He was also the D2 Remington Award winner. That goes to the best center in D2, which, how did that happen? And he got 2nd-team All-American. Shouldn't that be first? Either way. He was also first-team All-State in Ohio. So it's not like he was, a player, not that this would matter much because you're recruiting him for what he is now, but was a late bloomer. He was a good high school player too. Maybe it was just undersized or whatever it is. Like, Ohio is actually a pretty good, it's underrated high school football state. So I don't think he has any other Power 5 offers. I don't know if it was a visit or an offer with like Rutgers. Has a ton of Group of 5 interest. We'll see where that one goes, but I think that would be a real nice pickup for KU if they certainly could get him. As far as what they've lost lately, I just mentioned Lavelle and Armaj Reed-Adams. I don't think we've officially said on this show, since I know we had the episode right around the bowl game that our Austin Booker was like no longer going to be on KU. That was just based on him not traveling and everything like that. So I didn't feel the need to super reiterate it, but officially he is gone off to the NFL. So thank you to the Everydayers if you tuned in to that one. All right, let's finish up what KU still needs and kind of the tight window ahead in the transfer portal before spring ball for KU football. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet. You can get in on live same-game parlays, find bets in the new Explore tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays. You can bet on futures. You want to pick somebody to win the Super Bowl. You want to pick a team to make the Final Four, win their conference. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, what KU still needs in the tight window left with the transfer portal for KU. We will be back later this week for a KU UCF preview on Locked On Jayhawks. Again, I am having a baby, so I don't know how in and out I am going to be. There might be a chance that I don't get to a KU UCF recap or even a KU Oklahoma preview later this week. Just kind of depends when things come around. So apologies for that, but that would be the reason why. So KU still needs defensive tackle, right? You lose Gage Keys and Devin Phillips. Now, you do at least feel like you have, Tommy Dunn and DJ Withers and Caleb Taylor, who I thought came on pretty well over the back half of the season, and Keenan Caldwell. At least you feel like with Caldwell, he can be a rotational guy. So you at least feel like you have a bit of that. You have a couple guys who maybe redshirted this past year. We'll see what they can give you this next season, but certainly feels like if you could add at least one more D tackle. I also, Ron McGee had the season-ending injury like in fall camp last year. I don't know if the expectation is him to be back for next year and what that impact would have, but if he does come back for another year, that would be nice to have another, proficient body in there, assuming that he can come back from the injury. Obviously, you're trying to add another defensive end after the loss of Austin Booker. Makes a lot of sense. I think specifically if you can bring someone in who's good at pass rush, that would be very helpful for KU. At linebacker, makes sense to bring in somebody who can compete to be a starter. I think right now, if I was picking the three starters, I would look at Gilliam as being the Hawk guy. I would look at JB Brown, who I thought had a good season, and I thought Cornell Wheeler had a really good season for you. Now, Barry Hill was basically the starter in snaps and when he was available. He had to deal with some injuries this year, but some of the grades and stuff wasn't great for him. Is that indicative that he was playing through injury? Does that give a chance to Cornell Wheeler or JB Brown to beat him out? I don't know. But either way, those three guys would mostly occupy the two spots. And I think it would help you if you could add kind of that one more to where you'd have four guys really for two spots. Maybe that one more even plays the Hawk for you if you're not totally sold on Gilliam out there, who I thought actually played pretty well when he was in for Craig Young at the Hawk position. Offensive line certainly makes sense to add one. Center is the main position I'm looking at. And then maybe if you can add a second offensive lineman who's kind of a versatile guy that you can use in a lot of different spots to kind of go into the idea of it gives you coverage with multiple spots if they end up being a backup. You don't say no to talent, clearly. If a good receiver or something like that, or a good running back, wants to come, you make it work and you figure it out, even though you're kind of tight on scholarships. I don't think either of those things would happen. Specifically, if you're a running back, why would you come when you have Devin Neal and Daniel Hishaw in front of you? But and maybe that's the same thing for receivers when you have Lawrence Arnold and Luke Graham and all those guys in front of you. But you make it work if the right talent is there. But for the most part, in the trenches, defensive tackle, defensive end, offensive line, and then maybe a linebacker in there too. But what becomes difficult with this tight window that I'm kind of talking about. So it's like a dead period once the weekend ended here. And then it's dead until the following weekend. There's some like coaches conference or something or other. And then it opens back up for the weekend, next weekend, for recruiting, and you can bring on visits and all that stuff. And then it closes again, and it's like a dead period. And I think school starts and the semester starts like the week after or something like that. So you need to have the kid enrolled if you want to have them playing in spring ball. And so basically it's this last week gives you a very tight window, and you don't even have the full week to do it if you want to get them in for spring ball, which you very much do to get them to know the system. We've seen some players join after spring ball and in summer. Like I always think back to Lorenzo McCaskill, who was an all Sun Belt player for a Louisiana team that was really good over his last 2 years there. And it just took longer to get him into the swing of things and into the run of play because he wasn't there for spring ball. So very important if they can do it. Obviously, they'll still have options in spring ball, but the options are depleted a little bit. You really got to get your work done here over this next week or so for the majority of what you can bring in. So we'll keep an eye on that. Like I said, I'll try to get to it if I have time with Locked On Jayhawks, but we'll have a KU UCF preview later in the week. This has been LOJ. Find our podcast anywhere you get it or on our YouTube page. Have a good one. See you next time.